guys. It's here. I'm not blocking that for anybody, am I? That's okay? All right, so I'm Erika Moen, and I am a cartoonist. For the last 15 years, I've been creating comics and putting them on the internet. I just turned 30 this year, so that means literally half of my life I have been making comics and posting them online for everybody to read. When I first started as a little baby 15-year-old teenager, I was just posting my drawings and my comics and my pretty sweet Batman the Animated Series fan art for, to share with my other little internet friends and be like, hey guys, and that's how we'd bond. And now, today, sorry, it's my full-time career. It's very remarkable to me that that happened in the first place. I'm kind of baffled by it a lot of the time. It's my dream job. So oh, there we go, okay. I am best known for my autobiographical series, Dar, a super girly, top secret comic diary. I did that for 6 years between the ages of 20 to 26, and it is my story about being a lesbian who falls in love with a man and a whole bunch of dick and fart jokes. When that wrapped in, wait, when did that wrap? Like 2009. I decided, I was like, man, I need to take a break from autobio. I need to, I need to tell some fiction now. So I teamed up with Marvel Comics writer Jeff Parker so that he could do his first webcomic, and I could work with a fiction writer, and we did Bucko, which is a dick and fart joke murder mystery set here in Portland. It's kind of a theme in all of my work. And actually, when this wrapped up, when did this wrap up? Like a year or so ago? Dark Horse Comics was like, hey guys, you want to print that as a book? And we were like, oh yeah. So it's a really lovely hardcover book. And now I have started my brand new project just this year called Oh Joy Sex Toy. It is a comic that my husband and I do each week where we talk about something that has to do with the world of sex. Primarily, this focuses on sex toy reviews, but there's also interviews with people who work in the sex industry, and what's really, really important to me is talking about sex education. But basically, any subject that has to do with sex is on the table for discussion. So XOXO asked me to come here and tell you guys my origin story, how I turned just posting comics on the internet for funsies and took that and turned that into my full-time career that I work on 7 days a week, late into the night. And I figured that the best way to quickly summarize that would be to share with you the final strip I did for Dar, the autobio comic, because it takes 6 years of my life, from the ages of 20 to 26, and smushes it into an easy-to-read comic. So, in October 2003, I started keeping a journal comic. Why? Same reason anyone starts a blog, to tell the internet, hi, I exist. Let me tell you what I had for lunch. I began here. What the fuck am I doing? And wound up here. I've never been so happy. Indulge me as I take a stroll down memory lane. 2003 to 2004, 20 to 21 years old. Artists can't support themselves, so I'll have to get a real job when I graduate, busting out comics like a mofo. Depression meds. Embracing my dykedom. I know what I am and where I belong. In and out of relationships with my first true love. Obsessed with origami stars. They represent the act of creation in its purest form to me. You take a valueless scrap of paper and craft it into something delightful. Thus, my first tattoo, little stars on the shoulder. 2005, interrupted the on-again, off-again dance with my girlfriend to live in France for 6 months, but still stayed in contact with my ex anyway, because I was a fool. Artistically blossomed. I can choose what I do with my life and what I become. Second tattoo, which is this tree, which is also that tree right there. 22 years old. Visited England for a weekend. met one of my readers. I'm Matt. Homina. Instant attraction? Confused boner. Flipped the fuck out over my sexuality / identity. I'm a dyke. How can I be attracted to a man? He makes me so happy. And the sex is amazing. This is just a one-time deal. Oh, if only he were a girl. I still love my ex. Decided to enjoy this anomaly and went on a month-long trek around France with him. We're having fun, but you're just my fling, okay? Okay. My ex and I are getting back together when I go home. All right, I'm just glad we did this. And sorry, I'm not gonna pretend to do a British accent because mine's really bad. Came home. For the love of God, don't get together with your ex. Oh, tried to be just friends with her. Again, it was an epic disaster. We never spoke again. 2006, graduation. Watch out, world. Third tattoo, which is this light bulb. That's right up there, too. 23 years old, moved to Portland. So we still like each other, huh? Looks like. We both know long distance doesn't work. Yeah, US, UK. I guess we'll just keep doing this till something else happens. First real job. Soul, utterly crushed. Deep depression. Pushed away friends, stopped drawing, at some point fell off taking my antidepressants, because why not? 2007, new job, new lease on life, 24 years old. Ring, ring, that's my little cell phone. Definitely serious with Matt. Still on the outs with my old friends, but making new friends, drawing regularly. Continued to struggle with my identity. I still feel like a dyke, with this one exception, but bi doesn't feel like the right name either because my attraction isn't split 50-50 between guys and girls equally. Arg! 2008, became unhappy at work. Deep depression, therapy, medication, laid off. Repaired relationships, 25 years old. Took on freelance art gigs till I could find another real job. Started hanging out at Periscope Studio, which is right here in Portland. Happy with the all-inclusive label of queer. Got married. 2009, 26 years old. Holy crap, when the hell did I become a full-time artist? Became an official member of Periscope. Self-published my first solo book, weaned off of meds. Guest spoke at lots of events, most importantly to me, at my old high school. I'm self-employed, I'm creating, I'm in love, I'm happy. Woof. The one constant factor in my life over these last 6 years has been this journal comic. This comic has acquainted me with hundreds of kindred spirits around the world, introduced some of my most valuable relationships into my life, and helped launch my career. DAR has been incredibly mentally and emotionally fulfilling to work on. But I have other stories I want to tell now. Really, I feel like this is an excellent chapter to end DAR on. Thank you for being a part of my life. See you soon. Now, being self-employed is not something I ever wanted growing up. I really like stability and stable jobs, and when I was applying for colleges as a senior in high school, I didn't even look at the art department in any of the universities I was applying to because I was like, well, artists can't support themselves, so when I go to college, I'm gonna have to study something that I don't care about right now so that I can support myself when I graduate. But then, I went to college, and I think even before my first semester wrapped, I was like, fuck. I cannot spend 4 years at school and not spend it studying art, which wish I'd figured that out before I applied to colleges, but okay. So what I did, my school was very accommodating, and they let me create my own major, which I called it illustrated storytelling because I was afraid comics didn't sound academic enough. And what I did was I took half of the credits for an art degree and half of the credits for an English degree, and with the guidance of 2 faculty members from each department, smushed that together, made a syllabus, had them checking in on me to make sure I wasn't just like dicking around. And that's the degree I graduated with. Intellectually, I knew that studying comics in college was a mistake. I knew that like I was just throwing away my tuition money on this degree that was not going to help me get a real job in the real world when I graduated. Like, I knew in the brain, what are you doing? But then in my heart and my gut, I was like, this is what I want to do, and I'm just gonna deal with consequences later, which is kind of like a reoccurring theme in my life, where my brain says, what are you thinking? And then my heart and my stomach are like, go for it. That's also how I wound up on a reality TV show. But, so all throughout my teen years, I was doing these short little one-off autobio comics just about like stuff that happened in my life, and it was kind of here and there. And then once I did get into college and I was a 20-year-old, that's when I officially started DAR and keeping it as a weekly schedule. It was just a way for me to document my college experience and help me process and embrace my new lesbian identity. And also, I just like making people laugh. So then when I graduated in 2006, I moved here to Portland, and I immediately started looking for normal, stable, regular jobs. And I got them. I worked at 2 different studios that dealt with animation and like website design stuff, but I was not hired to do anything artistic. I was there to be a production assistant or do administrative stuff, so like art was not on the table. Although the second place where I worked was such a tiny little place that eventually everybody had to wear a lot of hats, and I did wind up getting to do art and animation stuff for them, but that is not why they hired me. It was just like a nice little surprise bonus. So while I was working at my day job, I also continued to update DAR each week because that was my hobby, and that's just like my compulsive thing that I have to do. I've used comics my entire life, much like everybody else uses Facebook or Twitter. Something happens to you, you think something that you think is kind of clever, or you just want to process something, and instead of making a Facebook post, I turn it into a comic, and then post it online. And it just helps me kind of process my life and helps me understand what's going on in my own brain. Like, when I fell in love with the man who would become my husband, I identified as a lesbian, so I used comics as a way to help me write down and figure out like all these conflicting feelings and thoughts in my shifting sexuality. And of course, posting it online. At that time, there weren't that many other queer cartoonists on the internet. I mean, you know, they're there. It's not like I was the only one, but you know, there weren't that many, and so other queer people would somehow stumble onto my comic and start reading it because they'd be like, hey, here's another queer person. I can relate to this. And then they would tell their friends, and my audience grew entirely from word of mouth. It wasn't advertised. I wasn't like, hey guys, go check out my comic. It was just like, hey, comic's up. And then bit by bit, like the readership just started growing and growing, which is pretty cool. So as a footnote, that guy I fell in love with lived in England. I lived in Portland. We had an 8-hour time zone difference between us, and when you are in a long-distance relationship that is that long distance, it is so expensive. I didn't know about Skype back then, or maybe it didn't exist yet, I don't know. But either way, my #1 expense was buying phone cards to call him, and you know, the international texts, and not to mention trying to fly to visit each other. So expensive. So at my day jobs, I'd make my money and I'd pay for my living expenses, and then anything left over, which, you know, it's not like I had a ton left over, but whatever was left over would go immediately into my savings account so that I could afford to visit this guy. And I was so cheap. Those were my cheapest years of existence. My friends would like want to get together. I'd be like, yeah, great, that sounds like fun. Like, great, we're meeting up at a restaurant. And I'd be like, oh. And then I would be that person who shows up and I just get a side of toast, or I just drink water. Like, I was that asshole. But I had something I needed my money to go towards. So, yeah. Then, 2008, the recession hit, and everybody at my studio got laid off. And I freaked out because I need stability. I need to know where my paycheck is coming from. And so, of course, you get laid off, and you immediately start looking for other normal, stable jobs to take the place of the first normal, stable job that you had. And it was during one of my freakouts when I went to go visit my friend Dylan McConis, who at the time was a part-time freelance artist. Now she's a full-time one, at her studio, Periscope Studio, here in Portland, which is the largest collective of comic creators in the English-speaking world, we think. That hasn't been disputed yet, so I'm just gonna go ahead and keep advertising. That's what it is. And I went to this place that's full of freelancers, and I was talking to Dylan and Steve Lieber, and I was like, oh my God, I lost my job. I don't know what to do. How do I make money? Looking for other jobs. Oh, it's so rough. And Dylan and Steve sat down and were like, well, hey, you've been doing this comic dar for a couple of years now. You have a lot of comics. Why don't you collect them into a book and sell that to your audience? And I was like, oh. And because, now, the reason why I mentioned being so cheap earlier in the long distance is because I had been saving all my money for my relationship, and so I had this little nest egg of cash that I could use to print my first book. This was before Kickstarter, so you had to save up your own money first. And so yeah, I did that. I put out my first book, and it was really well received, and people were buying it, which was amazing. Because like I was small potatoes, but somehow like I printed up 1,000 copies of this book, and I sold out of it in 6 months, which is nuts. I mean, and I know that sounds like small potatoes, perhaps to you guys, but like for being a nobody on the internet, that was kind of a big deal. And then at the same time, I knew somebody at a place, and they decided they were gonna do a children's book, and she was like, oh, I know this girl I went to college with, and just recommended me for this great gig to illustrate a children's book that paid pretty well. So like completely by the cosmos aligning together, this amazing freelance job was just dropped in my lap, and I was now freelancing. But it was just temporary. It was just to like keep my head above water while I looked for another regular, real job. But then, I remember there was some point in like 2009-ish when I realized, oh my God, I accidentally stopped looking for regular jobs because I was so busy selling my book and taking on more freelance gigs. Because when you do a weekly comic like this, like, yeah, people read it because they enjoy it, but it also creates this image that you are reliable and you are responsible and you can deliver on time and you meet your deadlines. You look like a responsible artist that somebody might want to hire to do art for them. And like completely by accident, this comic I was doing as a hobby wound up being this giant advertising billboard saying, hey, hire me to do art for you because I can deliver and it looks okay. So, so that was, that was pretty cool. Let's see here. Oh yeah, so yeah, that's the story of how I accidentally became a full-time artist. And now this is my 30th birthday was a few months ago, and it is now at this point in my life where I started doing the project that I feel like I was born to do, which is OJoy Sex Toy. My husband and I started it just this year, and it is the most rewarding and fulfilling job I have ever had. I care a lot about sex, and I don't just mean like, yeah, doing it. I mean like, everything that has to do with sex is fascinating to me. Like we have like the way people talk about it, the way people feel about it, the rules and regulations we as a society have. I don't even mean like legal laws. I just mean like the way people respond to knowing that that person over there is having sex, and like that can cause all, like it's ridiculous the way people respond to sex. And like there's kinks and there's fetishes and there's industries. You make money from the fact that people have sex. That's amazing. And then there's sex education, which is appalling in the US. And so like there's this whole world that revolves around sex. And I think it is so fascinating. And even in like over the last 15 years, sex was a topic that came up a lot in my comics because, hey, I care about it, right? But it was always kind of like the secondary topic to whatever the main topic was. With Oh Joy Sex Toy, like this is it. I am talking about sex, and I am using comics to do it, and that is 100% what this project is. It's not the secondary subject. It's like, no, listen, we're gonna sit down, we're gonna talk about sex, and you're gonna like it because it's a cute comic. I think comics are such a powerful teaching tool, especially for sex education. Because what happens with sex education typically is like you have this giant wall of this academic or medical language, and it's, how do you relate that? And then the diagrams that you get, like they're all weird and squiggly, and you look at this wall of text and you look at this weird diagram that doesn't look like anything you've seen in real life, and it's like, how does that even relate to me? How does that work here? Comics, on the other hand, you take the text, and you take the images, and you smush them together in this really friendly, accessible way, and you throw in some jokes in there, and then people, they feel like they're part of this fun conversation instead of just like being lectured at by this boring mathematician. I don't know why I said mathematician, that doesn't make sense, but you know what I mean, right? If a comic is put in front of you, you cannot help but read it. Like, try. You know, if the Sunday paper falls right in front of you, you're gonna accidentally start reading the comics. You can't help it. And I like using that as a subversive way to teach about sex. So this is my story. I never set out to be a full-time sex cartoonist. But that's what I am. And I love it. It is the best job I've ever had. And I'm using comics to talk about something that is so important to me. And it's helping people learn. Like, oh my God, when I go to events, I get all these people that come up and they're like, so I got this toy because I read your review. And I'm like, that's so cool. Anyway, so yeah, I guess ultimately, if you're gonna do comics or you're gonna do any form of storytelling, my one bit of advice is to tell the story that only you can tell. You have this unique voice, and like every subject has already been done a million times, but if you can bring your voice to it and you have something fresh to say with it in only the way that you can talk about this subject, people love that. People can see when you're genuine about a subject and when you're truly enthusiastic about it or passionate about it, and you take that unique voice of yours and you put it onto that subject, like, people go batshit for it. It's great. So, I don't know, all of you people who want to communicate or storytell, like, tell your story in the way that only you can with your voice. Worked out okay for me.
Erika Moen, everybody.